and I'm going to hide, and then you guys can do your magic.
Okay,
All right.
great. Cool. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us on our reboot to CoinDesk Live. This episode is our first of the lockdown issue, lockdown edition, because we're all living in this global pandemic right now.
An issue.
Yeah, also an issue. In these episodes, which are being done from our respective quarantine zones, we'll be chatting with speakers from our Consensus Distributed Virtual Conference, which is coming up May 11th through 15th. In the chat, I'm just going to drop in the registration link here so you guys can go ahead and register. Tons of great content there. But wait till after this video cast to register because we've got this great guest here today. We've got Alex McDougall. He's the co-founder and chief investment officer at Bicameral Ventures. That's a venture capital fund that raises and deploys capital directly through cryptocurrency. At Consensus, Alex will be leading an interactive session showing attendees exactly what kind of data trail they're leaving when they're surfing the internet, and then who's gobbling that up and selling it to the highest bidder, and how we might take some control back of that data. As such, we're going to focus today's conversation on this growing data collection machine that's going right now, and the surveillance tools that it's now spitting out. And these are all sort of under the guise of public health and safety. They sometimes are public health and safety, but we'll sort of talk about the trade-offs between surveillance for public health and safety, and then what that could turn into later. So quickly, before we start that whole conversation, just some quick housekeeping. Me and Alex are going to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes. You can go ahead and raise your hands in the chat. You can go ahead and start asking questions. My co-host John Biggs and myself will be going through those questions. If you want to ask Alex directly those questions, just put "I'll ask," and then once we get to the Q&A, which will be about 20 to 30 minutes as well, I'll just unmute you guys, and if you guys can behave during that time, then I'll let you ask the questions to Alex.
Go into the prep room otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise you go into the prep room. So I'll let you sort of have a conversation there. So yeah. Don't be a butthole when I unmute you, but otherwise I think that's good. So yeah, 20 to 30 minutes of conversation, 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll sort of close it off.
Awesome.
So cool, let's do this. Alex, are you ready?
I am. Are you ready?
Great. I'm
Is
ready.
It game time?
Yeah.
Sweet.
I've got my White Claw.
Perfect.
So repping for White Claw here. It's a little bit early to be drinking here, but that's all right.
It's
what
right
have you
on time
brought
to be
today?
drinking here. So 4:03 in Toronto time. One of my favorite distilleries on the Isle of Islay, Laphroaig. So
Lovely.
let's dive into it. I think we want to make this very casual. This is designed to be a chat. I think we've got a few topics that we're excited to talk to you about. And maybe, Bailey, if I can kind of kick off with a little bit of background
Sure.
around what we're planning on covering at the Consensus Distributed. And then we can sort of dive into the news around this today, because it's such an interesting and timely topic. And we've been writing about this idea of self-sovereign ID, this idea of digital personas, this idea of owning and monetizing and controlling your data for 2 years now. And it's a topic that triggers a lot of people's interest and holds people, but we've really seen the importance of it explode over the last month and a half. As our digital personas effectively become the only personas that we have, we can no longer go and meet in a public park and talk about secret stuff. We can no longer do the virtual calls for the first few things and then meet in a boardroom to close deals. We can no longer meet and date people. All of these things are now being forced online. So effectively, our digital personas are the only way that we have to interact with the world. And so historically, we've kind of had this, we see the top 10% of the user interface of what our digital world looks like based on the user experience, the websites, our phones, how that all looks and fits. But we really don't see what's behind the scenes and what's actually being captured, what data profile we're throwing off, what trails we're leaving, who's capturing it, what it all looks like together, and what it's being used for. And that's like 80% of our economy now is this this stuff that's powered by data. And there's no GUI, there's no graphical user interface for us to understand what we actually do and what we look like. And again, this is just becoming more and more and more important as we go through this, and we lose the ability to ever opt out or see the edge of the system. I mean, we're doing this on Zoom today, which we can get into a little bit, that's had some daylight shone on some of its policies. But it's going to be a fascinating topic and a fascinating conversation, I think, just because it's so relevant and it's really been an interesting time to have it become extremely urgent and hyper relevant in a very short period of time. So let's dive into a couple of specifics, Bailey.
Yeah, so just because you mentioned Zoom, I wanted to mention that some of the other apps that I've seen people start using a lot more of. So House Party is one of those apps. I downloaded it the other day. I think they had 50 million new users just last month, or just, at this month. And then also like TikTok and all that. How do we know what kind of user sort of security and privacy those companies employ? Are people even thinking about this, etc.?
So the short answer is we don't know. The short answer is no, people are thinking about it a lot of the time as well. And I mean, the longer answer is, especially let's talk about Zoom for 30 seconds as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's sort of two aspects to this, and this covers House Party as well. First, there's these sort of malicious breaches or these malicious attacks. House Party got painted as having weak security because a bunch of people had their Spotify and YouTube and certain other accounts hacked shortly after downloading House Party. Was that linked? Never really proven one way or another, but it got this reputation as being able to be hacked. Zoom as well. There's with passwordless videos or passwordless meetings, people are coming in. Somebody posted a big long account of how you can rootkit somebody's Mac just based on Zoom. And these are sort of the overtly malicious things. But in my view and understanding is that those are the by far the minority of what's actually challenging about these platforms. It's really the actual underlying business model that takes your anonymized personal data and effectively turns it into an asset that we don't know where it goes. And so the House Party privacy protocol is okay, but it says it uses your personal information, it uses your location data. It's all aggregated and anonymized, but we don't know where that goes. And the fact that it's a free app is very, very telling, and that's essentially how this entire economy works right now. And there's ways to use House Party privately. You can turn off notifications, you can enter the party quietly. There's a way you can do that. You can essentially restrict location data, you can restrict this and that. But I think where we need to realize is that if everybody does that, House Party doesn't exist. Right. And so we're in this paradigm where more privacy equals no tools, because we don't have a different way to do it. Like, data is the life force of everything that we do right now, and we don't have a different business model to do things differently. And that's I wrote an article for CoinDesk recently talking about how we desperately need a new data paradigm before we really dive into privacy laws, because if we just disconnect our data feeds and just disconnect and go private for everything, Tor for everything, all of the tools that we're using, we don't have any tools then. So effectively, we need this new paradigm of this way of collecting our own data, monetizing our own data, sharing our minimum amounts, creating different ways of paying with value and paying with efforts instead of with dollars. And there's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about with that. But it's really the stated business models that are the most worrying for me, not the occasional breaches and hacks that are. And just quickly, it reminds me of the Face app craze of, I guess, July 2019, when everybody could age their own face, and that like 30 million in a week. And then it wasn't even the explicit security stuff. It was looking at the user privacy. It was like, you grant us irrevocable permanent licensing to take, publish, use, alter, essentially do everything with your photo all the time. I mean, those are the extreme examples of this, but it's sort of the more the subtle ones that really are where these types of apps get you.
Yeah, and I guess following up to that, you're talking about this new paradigm, this new privacy paradigm, or even like security data collection paradigm. Have you seen companies within the crypto space, let's bring it back to crypto a little bit, in the crypto space that are sort of moving into that new paradigm?
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of my favorite spaces to dig into, and something that we really, really pay a lot of attention to and spend a lot of time with. I just got pinged by one of my good friends and investees who was presenting this morning with Brittany Kaiser on the data in privacy in times of crisis, Dele, who runs a really cool project called MetaMe, which is effectively a simple, straightforward, and before I get into the specifics of that, one of my key principles of how we need to do this can't be something where you need to be a computer programmer or even need to be tech sophisticated, because we need to have not 100,000 or 1 million or 20 million people on it. We need to have 1 billion people using these paradigms before it actually starts to move the needle. And you can't get 1 billion people to read something, choose to do something different. You need to make it within their existing vehicles. You need to make it an absolute no-brainer. So their lizard brain effectively chooses to go a different direction, where the value propositions are viscerally better. So better UX, more tailored, more customized, more rewarded, more incentivized, cooler recommendations, like those types of things are what is actually going to drive the needle forward. So we were talking about our project MetaMe, and essentially what that is in its simplest form is a single sign-on mechanism whereby you can sign into Google, sign into Facebook, sign into a bunch of these different services and start using all of the data that you already create on all of these other platforms, except bring it back to you, actually see it visually, what it looks like, what it's cross-referenced, and then start either selling it as the easiest, most straightforward way to do that. But what's even more interesting is actually taking packets of data and using those to get the customized services that you're used to with a Google or a Facebook. So take a little package of your interest and use that to power a search, but you know where it's from, you essentially have a data supply chain that goes into powering that search. And so where those guys are focused a lot now is and where I think we want to get into is this idea of tackling mobility, tackling contact tracing, and essentially using technology and using these types of platforms to help us fight this disease. So if you have this private repository of data that you're comfortable dumping in your healthcare, dumping in, activating the sensors on your phone to check your temperature live, but you're confident and confident that it's private and you can only share what needs to be shared for specific things, you can kind of hew that line between sort of the China approach of everybody needs to download this app and we're going to be forcing this upon you, and the complete opposite approach of everything's manual. And we've seen Google and Apple try and sort of do the tech version of that today, but with them being such mediocre data stewards and requiring actual opt-in from users, you're sort of getting the worst of both worlds. If it's not driven by the federal government and forced upon people, then you're probably not going to get the adoption required to actually effectively trace contacts. But if it is private sector and you're ending up with your data going to a mediocre steward anyways, then you're not really getting the benefits of the tech-enabled private sector solution either. So it's sort of, we can hew the middle line on those, and we can talk a little bit more about that maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, contact tracing is like the buzzword over the last couple of weeks. For anybody that has resisted the temptation to be online and read every piece of content coming out about coronavirus, contact tracing is just where if one person gets infected with coronavirus, then through Bluetooth or through knowing where those people are, you sort of figure out who else they interacted with, and then you can put certain, quarantine rules on those folks as well.
Can I share my screen for 30 seconds?
Yeah, I think so.
To show something really cool / terrifying.
Yeah,
so
totally.
This is the visualization of coronavirus in Singapore. So this is essentially based on government tracking. You can click into every specific case, and you can see where they're from, what their gender is, their age, where they are, where they link to, who else they link to. And
what does that building say?
That building says the Toguan Dormitory. Okay. So where they live.
Yeah.
Effectively what hospital they're at. And like that's kind of where this needs to get to, but the fact that I can click into it and say, hey, there's a 25-year-old guy in that hospital, I have no need of that information here.
Right.
So there's this big sort of gaping swath in the middle where the amount of information that needs to be known by the person that needs to know it, and as importantly, we need to know when that information gets deleted and forgotten, which our governments are terrible at, and our tech companies are potentially even worse at. And honestly, to get back to crypto and blockchain, that's exactly what this tech is designed to do, right? It's designed to set rules about access to digital pieces of value. So if we build this on blockchain and say, hey, I'm willing to share this within these coded rules that will delete at this time, will go to this person, will be available within these rules, and that's a perfect use of blockchain. Now, from today to actually rolling that out, there's a bunch of things we need to do, but there's a bunch of amazing projects working on it. And now's the time to do it, right?
That's really interesting, this idea. I had not thought of that before, but if you built this into some sort of smart contract that was like, all right, we will execute, deleting all this information after a certain time. And then the citizens of a country or anyone could sort of make sure that that contract was functioning, the way it's supposed to be functioning. And then we'd have some sort of ability to checks and balance, the government who's maybe running this platform.
So yeah, actually, really interesting. So again, this conversation was at earlier today with Brittany and Dele. They had a poll running of, and this has been my thesis for a while, that if you can guarantee that the information you share will be used by the right people for the purpose of fighting this disease to save lives, and that it will be deleted and forgotten afterwards, I bet your rate of opt-in for that piece of technology and that complete sharing is extremely high. Right. And I thought that for a while, and they did a poll on this talk this morning that was kind of running on the side. It was 94% of people would be willing to share a significant amount of information with authorities if they knew it would save lives and they were confident in like the framework and infrastructure they were sharing it. Yeah, and that's contrast that with the amount of people who would be willing to share for commercial basis their data, and that's like 57%, like 60%. Just add the altruistic angle to it, but we need to have that accountability and that ability to audit and create effectively a data supply chain. And then getting back to sort of the broader point of data sovereignty and data trails, a data supply chain is one of the key aspects of this. Why are we seeing certain things? What pieces of data are going where? What models are using that piece of data? What revenues are generated using the model that's using that piece of data? Like all of that, if we're going to attach value to this data and essentially bring ourselves into the digital world, this idea of a data supply chain is absolutely critical. And again, that's blockchain, not 101, but like 201 maybe.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. Just because we're talking about sort of the uptick of these contact tracing applications, I just wanted to sort of throw out some numbers that I found. I think this was a ZDNet article, but it just said less than half of Singapore citizens were comfortable sharing their positive COVID-19 tests with technology providers. I think it was like 40%. So that's like pretty close to half. But then when you ask them if they wanted to share it with their employer or school, it was around like 55 to 60%. So, I mean, I do think that shows what you were saying, that if people know that this is for a good cause, then they are more willing to share that data. And I think equally, it shows that people are a little bit wary of the technology providers. I mean, we have had huge instances of both abuse and also just seemingly a lack of security protections. So I guess I wanted you to talk a little bit more about this Google Apple initiative for contact tracing, just because this seems like it could be really worrisome in many people's minds.
And so, and sorry to keep referencing this conference today, it was just so topical to what we're talking about. But one of the questions that was asked was, is this a necessary evil or just evil? And
right.
I liked how it was phrased, that it was like, there's no option where this is just a good idea. And I genuinely think that these companies are not evil monoliths trying to vampire the world or anything like that. They're companies that are operating according to a shareholder value maximization thesis where they need to earn more money, and to earn more money, they need more data. And then all of their corporate strategy is essentially geared around that. That being said, I have a very hard time believing, and Apple, has done a little bit better job in general than Google has, with effectively giving them a letter of marque that says, hey, now you guys can have all of our health information. That's a area that they've been trying to get into for years and have been held and hived off for better or for worse for now. I know they're trying to say and push forward the narrative that they're using Bluetooth instead of GPS, so it's less invasive from that perspective, that it won't be linked with the rest of they're going to change your ID on a bi-weekly basis. But Google's entire business model essentially is, I am Google Alex in their system, and they have my mobility from my Google Maps, my emails from my Gmail, my browsing from my Chrome, and this like 360 or maybe 270 degree view of me as a digital person. So if they can add the health side of that, that is incredibly valuable and incredibly attractive to them. So I get what they're saying from an altruistic perspective, and I as somebody who cares a ton about distribution vehicles and ways to access people where they are the perfect place, and especially teaming up with Apple to get this rolled out quickly, and to a large number of people. But just the track record that they have and the complete fit of this in their puzzle piece makes me terrified. I mean, I saw a good tweet that said it was a reaction to the headline, and I can't remember who it was, but they're like, Google, I will literally go to war with you if you do this. And it's just, it's a line too far for a lot of people. And I think the tech solution is there, but it can't be governed by people who are operating in a data extractive paradigm. So that's really the main thing. And especially when they start talking about putting it into like the operating system of a phone, without really even giving people a chance to opt out, and then be like, oh, we'll delete it when the crisis is over. Like, we've heard that before.
Yeah.
But it's very challenging.
So I just want to remind people, you can go ahead and start raising your hands. You can start asking questions in sort of the Q&A box, and we will get to those very shortly. If you have questions for Alex, and just let me know if you want to ask yourself. If you can behave, then I can totally unmute you and you can do that. I did want to ask one other question, because people have a little bit more time on their hands. Some people are still working, but generally we're not like, going out and doing things. So we do have time on our hands. Some people got laid off. This is the perfect time to sort of retrofit your systems with, privacy enhancing technology. So for instance, like, this is not very hard, but so I've gotten on DuckDuckGo, and I've also downloaded Brave, and I've started sort of playing with those systems to be able to use them more effectively. So I guess, Alex, what are some systems or some pieces of technology that you would encourage people to download for this specific reason of, keeping your data in your own control and being private?
Yeah, great point. And I'll go through demos of some of these when we actually do this at Consensus in May. So I think DuckDuckGo is fantastic. But one thing I want to draw out that DuckDuckGo really made clear for me is it's an awesome program. I love that they focus on privacy. I love that they consistently blast out privacy newsletters and blogs and all of that stuff. But DuckDuckGo is materially a worse search engine than Google. And until we can fix that, and I don't have the perfect answer for how that's going to happen, we're never going to get 1 billion people on DuckDuckGo. And that's sort of one of the key things that we're always focusing on is, okay, well, yes, privacy to me is a feature. To the majority of people, it does not matter. Right. So with that in mind, here's a couple of the other, Brave's a great example as well. Ghostery is a really interesting app that is an extension for both Chrome and Brave. It's really, really illustrative, and I mentioned at the start of, we have almost no visibility into that bottom like 80% of what's actually happening in our browsing history. So Ghostery is fantastic at breaking down what trackers are where, what they are. They have a library of what all those things are. But Ghostery itself also is a little bit sketchy on the data side. They've cleaned it up a little bit, but they also they're owned by an advertising company. So it's like, it's almost a sheep in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's go with that. That's the better but to their credit, they do open it up and bring much more visibility into it, and I give them lots of credit for that. On your iPhone, there's an app called Lockdown that go through a demo of this on the consensus thing. But going from blank and just downloading it, and then going to one website, it'll show you every single tracker that is trying to access you. And guaranteed, at minimum, it's 60 plus on the first website you go to. And you will see 5 names in there, almost 100% guaranteed. Google, Facebook, DoubleClick, which is Google, Chartbeat, which is an independent third-party tracker, and Scorecard Research. And those index about 75% of the web, all combined together. And they're essentially the vehicles that create this data profile of you. So Lockdown does, there's a lot of ways to do it on a PC with browsers, but there's limited ways for apps sometimes on a phone. So Lockdown's fantastic for that. Dean might be on this, so hopefully he is, but Dean from Loginhood. Loginhood is a really cool Chrome extension that essentially does what I think it's a basic version of where I think this next paradigm needs to go. So you turn it on, and then everything that's captured by your browser is rolled up into Loginhood. And then Loginhood essentially has a data management platform, a demand side platform, and goes out and connects with the advertisers who are looking for that type of data and monetizes it on your behalf. So essentially, in parallel with what Google's doing, Loginhood is doing it, except the money's flowing back to you. So it's just is
that a cryptocurrency play? Do you get paid out in Bitcoin or crypto?
Not yet. So I think, and some of these things need to be started in, again, places that people are already. So I think we need to get people comfortable with that, and then say, hey, by the way, getting paid out in PayPal is annoying and expensive. Why don't you take this token instead? And by the way, here's all the other things you can do with it. I think we need to tell that story incrementally, because 100% agree with you. Like the even bringing fiat into it at all just adds massive circuit breakers, massive frictions, and especially when you're dealing in relatively small numbers for personal data, can sort of sewer the economics. But we need to tell the story and get people comfortable with the concept first, and then make it better and better and better and better. Okay. And to Ashton's question there, you are right. It's not available in Canada. You may be able to VPN around that, but I don't endorse those types of solutions at all.
We had a question regarding DuckDuckGo. Are there privacy-centric versions of these things that are materially as good or better than the non-privacy-centric ones?
So, I mean, Brave is a good example, but it is effectively Chrome reskinned. So it's using, the Google backend, and there's still a lot of ways that data escapes it. So I am going to say that there's not right now, because again, we don't have the infrastructure to make those projects as well funded as the ones who are monetizing data on the back end. And that's, it's not a great state of affairs. There are a ton of startup projects that are working to make that not the situation. And honestly, there's a billion tools that I'm sure are going to flood into the chat and into my Twitter and all of that right after, which I'm incredibly excited about. I desperately want there to be, and I really desperately want there to be, these tools that make it easy and at least as easy to do. I mean, at the start of kind of midway through 2019, I really got militant and just like cut off Google entirely, turned off all my location, all my everything. And I honestly, it felt like I was living in like 1996. Like without even GPS, where it doesn't pick up where you are all the time, right. It is a huge pain in the ass. Like when you're driving and trying to do stuff. But there's not that many. I mean, there's a couple open source map projects, and I know that those exist. But it's really hard to fight the power and the smoothness that is Google right now. But where I think our secret weapon is the fact that a year's worth of Google surveillance is potentially less valuable than 15 minutes of a well-designed survey with somebody who's really, really actually interested in being open and honest. So I think shared data is way more valuable than extracted data. And so all of the existing data paradigm is based around extraction. If we can actually figure out the right vehicles to get people to really truly open up and say what they like, what they want to buy, when they want to buy it, like the value gap between those things is exponential. And just to be a little bit specific about it, in the way that advertising works a lot today is you go to a website and you see an ad. You as a person, no idea why you see that ad. Sometimes it's creepy and weird. Sometimes it's something that you said in another room 20 minutes ago that your Alexa happened to hear and fed into a thing. Like those are all things that really happen. But all of that data, again, is based on extraction. It's based on trying to observe you while you don't know that you're being observed.
Right.
So for that sense, the amount of money that Google makes in advertising is obviously billions and billions of dollars, but the effectiveness of that advertising still isn't that good. There's a lot of misses. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of times where you see something that you just bought an hour ago and like, why am I seeing an ad for this? And that's because they're trying to keep you at arm's length and essentially observe what your behaviors are without actually interacting directly with you. And so you pay 50 cents per 1,000 clicks or something like that, and you have a 1% success ratio. If you can bring the consumer actually into that value chain, whereby they're coming in instead of at the cost per click stage, but instead they're coming in and saying, I'm flying to New Jersey on business class, come at me, bro. Then you're like 95% of the way there on that. And that's not worth 50 cents, that's worth $50 or $60.
Right.
And so when you're thinking about consumer data and what is valuable, it's not just your raw data feeds like that. The benchmark is $8 a month per person. But that's kind of like, that's the bullshit unrefined data feeds that are sort of flowing out from us as we go right now. It's those like targeted leads and that actual buying intent and those types of things that's where those companies are really making money. And there's no reason that shouldn't be us getting a cut of that, whether it's in a discount for the product or just straight up cash and we pay full price for it, however that works. But those types of technologies that are building the platforms that connect the user with the brand that wants to connect with them, that right now it's the Google model where they sit in the middle and say, nobody gets to see what's happening in the middle. There's a whole generation of new transparent platforms that are coming up, like MetaMe, like what we're starting to build with a separate project in India as well, that are just platforms that sit in the middle, build the technology, and take a cut of the revenue that flows through. And that's a way better paradigm than what we have right now.
So this is just sort of rhetorical, I think, but another question, great point about being observed. What's the downside to these platforms? If they told you why you were seeing a certain ad, this is actually really interesting. I would be fascinated to know why I was seeing a certain ad. Do you know if there's a platform that will sort of give you that transparency?
So to a certain extent, so Google does to a certain extent. They'll show you what they think you want to see if you click through like 11 nested screens to get to it. They're like, you're interested in this and you're interested in this and you're interested in. You cannot click deeper into those to say like, hey, you browse to this thing and to go to that. So you can't do that. There are a few other platforms, and probably not going to get it right. I think it's Twitter. There's one other that has a little link on the bottom of the ad that says, why am I seeing this? And I don't think it doesn't give you great detail. Again, it's sort of that high level surface. And some of it honestly is like, you're seeing this because we collect your data to personalize for you. It's like, great, not what I want to know.
Yeah, obviously, got that.
Yeah, it's back to that data supply chain. And I think the business model of effectively everybody right now is based on the assumption that consumers will opt out and reject platforms if they show up and open their inner workings, which I think is one of the core fundamental reasons why the surveillance complex evolved the way it is. And Shoshana Zuboff's fantastic book, Surveillance Capitalism, talks about that. Of this is effectively a decision that Google, who really created the industry, made in 2008, 2009, that said, we want to keep the user at arm's length. Obviously, they would never say that. They would never say that personally. But that's effectively the result of their business strategy for years and years and years after that. And that's really become how everybody else thinks about it, is the massively complicated terms of service that are complicated by design because they don't want people to understand it. So
Right.
I think that we need to have a leap of faith in people to be okay with how this actually works. And it's going to be messy to a certain extent. I think we can hide some of the messiness, but deliver the benefits instead. But I think we need to have some faith in people that they're going to see and say, hey, I'm now getting $10. I now understand how the sausage is made, but I'm getting money out of it and I'm getting a better recommendation. I think we need to sort of rely on people's greed and the lizard brain, for lack of a better word, to just go with the things that are viscerally better for them.
Right. Yeah. And then, yeah, we had a question. Has anyone ever clicked on a Google ad before? I will say, I will answer this question. I used to not at all. And I don't know if it's because now I'm more aware that this is happening, but I feel I'm more aware of ads now just because of the industry I work in. And they're getting better for sure. They even like 5 years ago, they were pretty terrible. But now it's like if I leave a shopping cart, dwindling or just sitting there, then I'll get advertisements for that. Like, just want you to know that's still there and you can buy this, which makes sense. Obviously, that's why I'm getting the ad. But, when they repeatedly shove it in your face, I'm all, you're right. Maybe I do need that.
Maybe that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would make my life better right now.
No, you're sorry, keep going if you.
Yeah, well, there was just a question about microtransactions as well. Where do microtransactions fit in the space? So also regarding Brave as well. I have not used the Brave rewards yet, so I'm not sure exactly how that works. Maybe you have more insight into that.
Cool. My analyst Monty, who I'm sure is listening in on this, is a monster Brave microtransaction user.
Nice.
And that's like when I think about, okay, well, Google tried it and several people tried it in the early days of like, hey, would you pay $1 for this service? And that was a monetization vehicle. And so you didn't need to take data and sell it on the back end. Oftentimes it's the friction. It's not the dollar, it's the friction and annoyance of like connecting a credit card and this and that and all that actually drives like, oh, well, there's a free version and something happens, I don't know,
Right.
that drives the reason to do this. And so I think it's exactly the Brave model of doing things that are valuable for a platform, earning rewards or tokens that are within that platform, and then using that currency to buy your privacy effectively. Like that's sort of the loop that I envision of paying for privacy with value. So you end up with this self-contained circular platform that doesn't necessarily need, it obviously needs some currency and some capital that flows through it. But the trade of the platform isn't all of your data for a free platform on the back end.
Right.
Facebook is a great example. I mean, I wrote an article about when Facebook first started talking about their crypto coin, what it actually should look like or what it could look like. Not this AML data vampiring scheme that they have now, but like the things that make Facebook as a platform valuable are likes, shares, content, user-generated content, and attention. And they need to have all of those things happening for them to have valuable data to do the true reason of their platform, which is sell all that shit to advertisers on the back end. But if they have people who are incentivized to do all of these things and actually add value to the platform, and are earning Facebook coins or whatever you want to call them in return, then those are the people who add the most value. Those should be the people who are potentially able to opt out or to pay for having privacy or to pay for shutting off these data feeds. I mean, ideally, Facebook turns itself into, this will never happen, a connection mechanism, like what I was talking about before. There's a ton of advertisers who want to meet a ton of people, you are the connective infrastructure. Take your cut out of all of those, but just make it a marketplace. Don't make it you're taking 90% from both sides. And I obviously can't prove this, and they're making tons of money today doing it, but I suspect that the market for that is multiples of what it is today with this extractive data paradigm. But that's sort of my thesis, and that's the tech that we're investing in to build the next version of that.
Right. Yeah. One question that I usually have is, even if we got a solution that allowed me to control my data, that allowed me to share it only with people who I wanted to share it with, is the amount of data that I've already sort of lost, that has already been siphoned off of me, would it even make a difference? I mean, long term it would, but for me personally, knowing that, there's been like however many years of data extracted from me.
I can just hear Dele wanting to jump in here as well. No, this is a wonderful point. And I think that's sort of step number one is there's so much data about you already in the stores of these various platforms, but it's all available to you. So you can go into Google, you can go into Facebook and click through a bajillion screens and see all of that stuff. You can download the CSVs that has all of your actual formatted data in it. It means nothing to you as an individual. And it blows my mind that there's not even actually a black market for like, here's my Excel version of my Google or my Google profile. But we can build tools, and this is what MetaMe is doing as one of their initial projects, is essentially saying, hey, log into my platform with your Google ID. I, as the platform, will go in, grab all of your Google data, and essentially use it to seed this self-sovereign ID of yours. And then go into Facebook and take that, and we're going to add it to your Google data. And then go into LinkedIn and take that, and we're going to add it to all that data. And then go into your Uber and take that, and we're going to add your mobility data to it. And essentially, it's this platform that lives at the edge, lives with you, is yours to control, that has this 360-degree view that is seeded by all of the existing data that exists on all of the platforms about you. So to exactly your point of we've lost so much, there's so much out there on us already, we can't change that. And these are still the vehicles that we're going to use on a daily basis, but we can start at least parallel tracking our own stuff with it. And I think on day 2, I can create a better profile of myself than Google does by adding, I don't use Facebook, but by adding LinkedIn to it, by adding my Google Health to it, by adding all of these various other pieces to it. And then when we get back into the Corona side, if we're really confident in this, by adding my temperature reading from my phone, by adding my mobility profile to it, by adding a vaccine that I got that I can swipe in and say to the subway and say, hey, I'm healthy, I can get on here. There's so many ways that you can go from there. But to your point exactly, if you're starting from zero, then we're so far behind.
Yeah. This is kind of a silly question, but I'm currently part of a dystopian fiction reading club right now. So I have to ask this. What dystopic novel do you think we're closest to right now?
So there's a couple, I think.
All of them?
And they're both super interesting. And we were actually talking about this not too long ago. There's a novel called Snow Crash, which is by Neil Stephenson, which is fantastic. That actually was written in 1992. So before Windows even, or like at the very dawn of Windows, before actual connected internet, and all of that foresees this sort of world of the United States is effectively dissolved and everything's become franchised. So it's effectively capitalism on steroids. So there's no universal laws, there's no taxation, there's no habeas corpus, there's no like rights. It's all pure capitalism. But there's this concept of the metaverse, which is this world where you can goggle in and live in this virtual reality side, that you're still in the physical world and people move around within it. But that's sort of the world that's governed by rules and laws, while the regular world is governed by nothing and pure dollars and cents. And theoretically, we're not that far away from that in certain situations. I mean, we need obviously advances in VR, but if we aren't careful, and we don't change the pure hunt for pure capitalism, as we get better and better biometrics, better and better EKG machines, more and more Fitbits, more and more ways to actually govern and see not our digital profiles, but our actual physical profiles. If we don't fix the data paradigm that essentially encourages extraction of all of this data and encourages manipulation of us to be predictable and to do things that make us more valuable to these platforms, we're essentially heading towards a world where we no longer have, this is sound massively hyperbolic, but we don't really have free will. If we're just consistently manipulated by a series of algorithms that know our biases, know our pulse, know our heart rate, know all of our physical beings, we as individual lizards don't really stand much of a chance. I think we're very close to that in evolution, but we're at a fork right now. We have the opportunity to do it better.
Yeah, I tend to agree and also be really worried about this, like you know, hyper capitalism, or what I would call like hyper consumerism, where that's all that people really, that's all that gets pushed to people, and that's all that they seem to care about because it's just pushed to them all the time. Having said that, I did get 2 chips implanted in my hands for various reasons. And so I'm like on the process of also becoming one of those people that can be tracked basically anywhere. So, you know, I don't know, give and take on some of these things.
No, but sorry. I agree with you on, and I'm not sure your rationale for, sorry, just a second.
No, that's okay.
Not sure your rationale for the chips, so we don't need to get into it, but I want to get to a world where I want to tell a vehicle, whether it's MetaMe or whether it's another piece of technology, I want them to know my health. I want them to know my entire browsing history. I want them to know what I want. I want them to know my mobility history. Like, I want to pour my feelings and emotions and thoughts into that, because it's essentially literally a meta me. It's a virtual version of myself that can take advantage of all the computing power, all the connectivity. It can be my digital avatar that fights off content holes and fights off algorithms that are essentially trying to manipulate me. It can be a clean version of my thinking process that when I make a dumb lizard decision, it says, hey, do you really want to do that? Is it not just this thing that you're doing? Are you, if I'm making a hiring decision, is it like, oh, are you hiring this person because they look like you? Like how, a ton of our hiring works today. You can eliminate biases. You can operate essentially a clean version of your wetware and your OS. But you need these complete 360-degree computational vehicles, and we need to build the tech that we're comfortable pouring our data into in order to have that happen. I mean, nobody's ever going to give Google that much data to be able to do that. If we do, we're fucked. But we need to have these self-sovereign vehicles that we're comfortable pouring all that stuff into in order to essentially create, we think about it as almost like the economy of digital integrity, where we have this machine speed world, but we're capable to operate in it as lizard brain humans. That's an interesting and futuristic world. I think about that as the utopic version of the dystopia, but we're definitely at an inflection point right now.
Yeah. I would say utopias scare me just as much as dystopias. So that's one thing that I struggle with. It's just, you have to find the right balance. Sorry, Kyle Collier, maybe I'm saying that right, hopefully, had a question that he's posted both in the Q&A and the normal chat. I was going to get to it, I promise. Are there ways to spend your rewards or tokens? I think he's talking about MetaMe, correct me if I'm wrong, without disclosing all your data. Don't you have to share your data with banks anyways if you sell to fiat and deposit into that account?
Sure. So, and that's kind of the world we live in today is your rent and your groceries get paid in fiat. So the sphere of what you can actually do with digital tokens is very limited, unless you have some sort of platform, Kyle, that turns your tokens into gift cards that you can then reward. Kyle runs a really interesting platform out of Toronto that turns crypto into gift cards.
Okay, right. So you guys know each other. Good, great.
No, all good. But no, it's a super cool and interesting point. And I think the way that I think about it is that we're always going to have volatility, we're always going to have frictions, and we're always going to have major challenges in adoption for crypto, as long as we have that major wall and friction point between crypto and fiat. And I think that wall is getting sort of more and more broken down, with whether it's the US saying digital dollar, which I don't think is actually what people necessarily think it 100% means, or China experimenting with it, Canada experimenting with it. There's all sorts of people who are starting to experiment with this idea of digital dollars. And it's still the KYC angle will still be applicable there. But the more and more we can create this ecosystem by which you never need to flip out of on-chain or digital-based currencies, the less and less there is that friction that destroys the value of micropayments, ensures that we're always going to be stuck within the the T+2 settlement world of what we exist today, and the trillions of dollars that sort of are set against the frictions that are built into our existing financial system. So I think a lot of the volatility and a lot of the challenges that we have with crypto today are people can earn it, but people can't do what they need to do with it. So you see a lot of, if you are earning in crypto, and the original version of our fund, we paid all of our employees with crypto, but you can't pay rent with that. So even if crypto's down, you still need to sell it to fiat to pay rent. And so it's not like an asset where you sell because the fundamentals have changed. There's a lot of this forced selling and forced buying that really adds to the volatility of it. And essentially, until we can have sort of an end-to-end earning crypto, spending crypto to live, then we're going to see this weird schisms in various places where there's just friction forced into the system by needing to convert to the old world. And so we can't have this fully end-to-end 360-degree circular Excel model style of economy until we've kind of got it all within the same paradigm. And honestly, we're years away from that, but we used to be at a nucleus, and now we're at a nucleus plus a little covalence around it.
Right. I mean, I do think that the narrative with crypto, or maybe it's just Bitcoin, maybe it was just Bitcoin's narrative, but that sort of shifted. I mean, in 2014, late 2013, 2014, there was a great push to create the circular economy in Bitcoin. So, I had Bitcoin from back in the day, and then I spent that Bitcoin on various frivolous shit that now I wish I had the Bitcoin for. But that narrative has definitely shifted of, well, this is more of a store of value, hodling is huge. So I don't know that it's hard for me to see that circular economy idea come back into vogue. Now, maybe it will.
But I totally agree with you, but I don't think it's asset based. I mean, it's similar to how in our existing economy, we have gold and we have dollars, right? You have different versions or different things that you want to do with both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you can earn in tokens that are spendable within a specific small ecosystem,
Fair.
that type of mini circular economy is cool as well. Or stable coins, or if there actually is a digital dollar, it's more the friction of taking it from something that's on chain where you have complete traceability, everything that's happened with it, with various privacy parts that are built in but transparent, and then taking it, just wrenching it off of that into our archaic fiat world where everything is fake and we just back end it with a ton of manpower and dollars. Mm-hmm. And those I think are where the breaks are. I think we can have theoretically a entirely on-chain world that has the hodlers that have the not desire to spend those but hold it as a store of value and the reserve currency, and then the tokens that maybe they don't go up in value, but they are earned at a certain rate and spent on things at a certain rate, all within that circular economy of earn and spend, earn and spend, earn and spend. And everybody's able to exist within that economy. I mean, it's a different system than what we have today, but operating those two in parallel is where the frictions are. And obviously the crypto world is tiny compared to the other world.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. We had one other question. We're pushing up on time, but that's all right. So we hear a lot about ZK snarks and optimistic rollouts being sort of ZK snarks being the panacea of privacy and data sharing. In your position at Bicameral Ventures, I'm sure you've heard a lot of pitches. Do you know how close we are to a lot of that stuff working?
So yes, and so we're close to very basic versions of it. I think that they're the basic idea of the proof of a calculation is relatively well established. I think where we need to get to on it is proof of something being true. So proof of the fact that, you know, we use this example all the time of you go to a bar and you have your ID, and the bouncer, by seeing your ID, sees everything about it. All they need to know is your age. And so a minimum share world would be, okay, everything else is blurred out, but they can just see your age. The ZK Snarks world is that they don't see anything, they just see a big check mark that says, yeah, you're good to go.
Right.
And so I think we're the big check mark world, we're still relatively early in that. The private execution environment, private compute, I think there's people doing incredible work with it. Oasis, Enigma, both of those guys are building some really cool stuff. But I think we're very, very close to at scale rolling out the minimum share world, which is even then an exponential leap forward from what we have today, which is the here's everything world.
Sure.
So I think we're working at it in stages, and not to plug what we've just come up with a couple days ago, but we're starting to write a Git book about all of this stuff that sort of gets to the, I won't call it utopia, but the version of the world that we want to build 10, 15 years from now, and sort of all of the steps that are there along the way, called the lizard and the machine. But a big part of that is starting today. We need to move to a paradigm that works with today's technologies and can be actually executed. And then, but the real long distance future of that, if we're really going to be comfortable pouring our EKGs, pouring our brainwaves, pouring everything into these data vaults, we need to have essentially a ZK Snarks for data that is a purely non-transferable, completely private execution environment that nobody can look into. And right now, that idea is that nobody looks into it, is no people look into it. But we actually need to build it so that no machines can look into it as well,
Sure.
because that's going to be the effective operating agent of what we're trying to build here as well. So I won't say it's nascent, but it's relatively early days, but there are extremely strong contenders to do it and to scale it, but we need to get the UX right. And until we get that, we're going to be limited to our little hole in the wall here in crypto world.
What was the book called again that you were talking about?
Oh, the one that we're writing called
Yeah.
The Lizard and the Machine.
The Lizard and the Machine. Are you taking like suggestions on that?
Absolutely, we are. We're going to be posting an outline for it probably next week. And so The Lizard and the Machine, maintaining human integrity in a machine-speeded world.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Okay, we're about out of time. If anybody has questions or wants to pitch you or wants to tell you that your drink of preference sucks, where can they get a hold of you?
So first, you can restrict your whiskey preferences to my partner, Kesem Frank, who acknowledges that Laphroaig sucks, and he's a big Speyside guy. And so Alex at bicameralventures.com is my email. You can follow me on Twitter at alexm_bicameral, or hit me up on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for being on the show. I wanted to thank all of the attendees. We had a little over 30 for some amount of time, for listening and engaging here with us, asking great questions. Nobody got on the actual voice, but that's all right. We'll try it next time. We're going to be running the show now twice weekly from here until the Consensus Distributed Virtual Conference. And again, that's May 11th through 15th. The registration link is up in the chat. I can post it in there again here in just a minute. Sign up for that. It's going to be awesome. And Alex's session, where he's going to show you hands-on how to use some of this tech that enhances your privacy, that's going to be on Monday the 11th. So definitely make sure you register for that. It's going to be really cool. And then also make sure you register for the next CoinDesk Live. So this virtual video chat that we've got going on, that's going to be on Tuesday, April 21st. And we'll be speaking with Priyanka Desai and Aaron Wright of OpenLaw. And that's the company that launched the LAO, a legal DAO. And just in case anybody doesn't know, that's Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And that was to fund Ethereum startups. So that should be a really cool conversation as well. But yeah, thanks again. And, stay the F inside until all this is over.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining. Cheers.
Thanks so much.